My name is Wang Zi, but I come from humble beginnings. The only thing remotely related to this name is the determination I carry within me, the belief that there's nothing extraordinary about anyone. At the age of 15, while still in university, I was hailed as a genius girl. 15 years later, the tides turned, and I became an unmistakable leftover woman. Perhaps due to my limited interaction with peers during my childhood, I lack some emotional depth. Thus, while excelling in career and academics, my love life is a mess. Before even graduating from university, a major corporation hired me. This year marks my 12th year with the company, and just as I was competing for the position of deputy general manager with another candidate, rumors of a parachute drop appointment emerged. The other candidate, it seemed, was just a formality. My appointment seemed secure, but fate had other plans. The position didn't go to me or the other candidate, but to someone transferred from another branch, Fuqingye. Subsequently, I was reassigned to my current position as planning director, role not under Fuqingye's jurisdiction but another deputy general manager. I can't help but wonder if the company's decision was intentional. Regardless, I'm filled with resentment towards the company's decision. On Monday morning, managers and above were summoned to the company's finest conference room. I woke up an hour early to groom myself properly. I didn't want to hear any pitying remarks about Director Wang's setback. I aimed to present myself in the best possible light. Even if I felt like a drowned rat, I'd maintain the demeanor of a queen. I absent-mindedly flipped through the materials provided by the general manager's secretary, waiting eagerly for Fuqingye's arrival, much like a hunter awaiting its prey. Of course, I didn't have a gun. If I did, I couldn't guarantee I wouldn't shoot Fuqingye dead. The conference room door opened, and almost immediately, I looked up. I saw an unfamiliar man following the general manager. He towered over the general manager, listening stoically as the general manager spoke. There was no smile on his face, just a nod of acknowledgement, as if he were the general manager himself. Sure enough, he sat in the seat reserved for the deputy general manager, with Fuqingye's nameplate in front. I clenched my teeth and hastily wrote Fuqingye on a piece of paper, then crossed it out fiercely. In my mind, I envisioned scenes of Fuqingye making mistakes at work, being ostracized, isolated, and ultimately expelled from the company. It was as if my soul had left my body, floating before Fuqingye, gleefully saying, "Surrender now." Of course, this was just a fantasy. Fuqingye's introduction was in the presentation, and he seemed quite impressive. He couldn't be considered a true parachute drop, having already served as a vice general manager in a foreign branch. Fuqingye, 32 years old, with sharp features and a clean-cut appearance, exuded an unforgettable aura. As a stranger in the vast sea of humanity, he possessed the potential to leave a lasting impression. In a way, he could be considered a genuine diamond in the rough. But he was serious, his face akin to a drawn curtain. At least, since his arrival, I hadn't seen him smile once. He seemed less charming than the watch on his wrist. I wonder how a leader lacking in affability can establish themselves in the company. Fuqingye, let's wait and see. My first confrontation with Fuqingye occurred at his welcome ceremony. Everyone shed their professional attire for casual wear, gathered on the open-air balcony around a table bustling with people. Moonlight cascaded onto the white railings, while the scent of wine mingled with the breeze. Despite the picturesque scene, I couldn't muster any interest. Instead, I watched Fuqingye intently, like a leopard fixated on its prey, observing the various individuals offering him toasts. As Fuqingye reached his limit, I approached him, continuing to offer him drink after drink. By the fourth drink, he politely declined. "I can't drink anymore." "General Manager Fu, are you denying me face?" I raised my voice slightly, refusing to accept his refusal. He scrutinized me, seeming to detect my hostility. Leaning in close, he whispered in my ear, "Are you Director Wang? I heard you were also a candidate. Why do you have a problem with me?" I didn't expect Fuqingye to be so direct. His words ignited my anger, and before I could think, I lifted my foot and stomped fiercely on his shoe with my heel. The red tablecloth on the long table fluttered slightly, and he winced in pain, then glared at me expressionlessly. You, woman, have quite the nerve. As soon as he finished speaking, I lifted my foot off his shoe and placed it back down, smiling at him. Sorry, it was unintentional. Then I pulled out a chair, stood up, and greeted others. Enjoy your meal and drinks, everyone. My smile was composed, as if nothing had happened. But that encounter marked the beginning of our conflict. I was supposed to hand over a project I previously managed to the new operations director, but I insisted on retaining control. I argued convincingly in Fu Qingye's office, wearing an expression that said, "What can you do to stop me?" I thought to myself, I won't make it easy for you. But before Fu Qingye faced any difficulties from me, I began to struggle myself. In my new position, I had to readjust to every aspect of my work. Unable to garner support from my subordinates, the managers of the planning and creative departments even seemed to undermine me. They were older and more experienced, so I had to juggle the challenges of my new job while engaging in a battle of wits with them. Amidst my hectic schedule, I received a call from my friend Shevin, saying she wanted to introduce me to a potential boyfriend. He was her classmate, recently returned to the country and eager to get married. Though older, he was definitely handsome and well-off. Shevin added, "Considering your age, he's not too old." "What kind of person are you?" I exclaimed. "The kind who truly cares about you. Consider it settled." "You're not getting any younger," she said before abruptly ending the call, leaving me with a string of unfamiliar numbers, a date, time, and venue, along with the name, Abel. Staring at the screen, I counted the days. Wasn't this just 3 days away? Shevin still handled things as efficiently as ever. Outside the window, dusk settled in, signaling the onset of autumn. The sky darkened gradually, and I watched as the neon lights of the bustling city began to illuminate, adding a touch of tenderness to the otherwise chaotic and dilapidated scenery. I suddenly felt a tinge of loneliness, but also a hint of sentimentality. Abel didn't contact me in advance, and after much hesitation, I didn't call him either. When it comes to relationships, I always find it hard to swallow my pride. I thought to myself, if he shows up, we'll have dinner together. If not, then forget it. I returned to the office and continued working. It was lunchtime, and the Western restaurant was already crowded with people. I looked around, but didn't see any man sitting alone. However, I did spot Fu Qingye sitting near the window. Since Abel hadn't arrived yet, I thought I might as well taunt Fu Qingye a bit. "Mr. Fu, dining alone?" He paused flipping through the menu, looked up at me, and seemed reluctant to engage with me. After a while, he spoke to me, waiting for someone. "By the looks of it, Mr. Fu, are you here for a blind date?" Fu Qingye didn't answer me, but instead asked, "Is Director Wang dining alone too?" "I'm here for a date." As I said this, I took out my phone to call Abel. I thought to myself, I must maintain my momentum, regardless of the outcome. It's strange, acting like a bickering child in front of Fu Qingye, behaving so immaturely. I intentionally made the call in front of Fu Qingye. To my embarrassment, Fu Qingye's phone actually rang. I looked at him in disbelief. "You." He calmly answered the call. Surprisingly, my call went through. At that moment, I wished I could find a hole to hide in. "What's going on?" Fu Qingye turned out to be my blind date? It seems that this phone number belongs to Fu Qingye. He looked at me with surprise, then smiled provocatively. "Miss, please take a seat." I felt like a clown who had just been unmasked on stage, embarrassed and angry. When I sat down, even the chair seemed to protest with a loud creak. "You were classmates with Shevin?" She actually told me that the other party was a tall, rich, and handsome man. She fooled me. "Yes, we were classmates during postgraduate studies." Unfortunately, she also told me that the other party was a beautiful woman. So disappointed. He shook his head in mock disappointment. I wanted to kick him, but the table was too long, and I was wearing a skirt. So, I muttered curses under my breath, feeling like the dinner was turning into a battlefield. "Why do you have such a big grudge against me?" "For the chance to double my salary."
Fu Qingye shrugged indifferently.
"I also climbed up based on my abilities. If you're not as capable as others, you should work harder, rather than blaming others. Who knows if you really got here based on your abilities?" Then go ask someone who knows.
Fu Kenji replied earnestly.
I stabbed my fork forcefully into the steak and gritted my teeth at Fu Qingye. Just you wait, I'll take you down someday. Fu Qingye remained unfazed, his face as serious as ever. Can't you be more elegant, miss? Sorry, I can't. It felt strange to banter with Fu Qingye. Though I saw him as an enemy, when we actually interacted, it felt like we were familiar friends. And with every move he made, it seemed like he was telling me, I like you. Even if you want to take me down, you can't. In this era where profit reigns supreme, I didn't know if this was just an illusion created by Fu Qingye. Having been stabbed in the back several times, I couldn't afford to let my guard down in such a short time. After listening to my story, Shevin burst into laughter on the phone. So Abel is the competitor you mentioned earlier. Oh, I should have known you two knew each other. Go to hell. You have no idea how embarrassed I was. Ah, you should consider him. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Before Shevin could finish, I hung up the phone. She really enjoys watching the excitement without considering the consequences. After the incident with Fu Qingye, I immediately threw myself into work, becoming the epitome of diligence and efficiency. Knowing that many people were looking for any opportunity to criticize me, I had to constantly adjust my words and actions, reflecting on everything I said and did, and maintaining a defensive mindset at all times. Soon, I welcomed the biggest collaboration of the year. I pulled together a small team from the planning, creative, budgeting, and technical departments to form a specialized group consisting of fewer than 10 members, directly under my management, specifically for this project. This was the first time I had formed a cross-departmental specialized group. If it didn't succeed, it would be a huge blow to my reputation. We revised the project 3 times, each time almost starting from scratch. There were constant complaints within the team, accusing the other side of deliberately making things difficult for us. I personally negotiated with the other party to push the project forward. Just when failure seemed imminent and the whole company knew about it, a turning point occurred. The person in charge from the other side personally approached me and revealed their intention to collaborate with us. You won. In the end, you managed to impress us. Why me, and not another company that would benefit you more? Because of your creativity, sincerity, and intentions. The other party emphasized these 3 aspects. Sitting across from him, I gave him a perfectly calibrated smile, secretly thinking that these 3 words truly touched my heart. The last thing he said to me was, Director Wang, if you ever want to try a different company, you're welcome to join us. We offer 1.5 times your current salary. I didn't agree, but I was very happy. This was the greatest affirmation and reward for my abilities. Signing a contract worth tens of millions made me shine once again within the company. We had been pursuing this project every year, but this was the first time we succeeded. My impressive performance finally earned recognition for my capabilities from them. Even Fu Qingye's gaze towards me carried a hint of appreciation. At the same time, the previous project was coming to an end. I went to Fu Qingye's office with the documents to finalize the last details. Even walking felt a bit surreal, partly due to my mood, and partly because I hadn't slept well for many days. Fu Qingye's office was about 3 times the size of mine, with better lighting. He looked up from a stack of documents as I entered and motioned for me to sit across from him. Instead of discussing work, the first thing I said to him, tauntingly, was, So, feeling the pressure now? Can you check your dark circles before you speak? Just for that, I feel like you have no efficiency in your work at all. Damn. I couldn't help but slam the table. I thought to myself, anyone working under him would be doomed for life. With such a sarcastic and direct leader, rebellion was inevitable sooner or later. Did you come here just to tell me this? No, to approve the documents. Just as Fu Qingye reached out to take the documents, his phone rang. Seeing the number on the screen, I noticed his expression darken slightly before he quickly answered the call. During the phone call, Fu Qingye's gaze was cold and distant, with a hint of sorrow lurking beneath his serious expression. Before I could inquire further, the call ended. Within seconds, the sadness on Fu Qingye's face vanished. His gaze returned to my face, furrowing his brows before he asked, Do you like me? For a moment, I was taken aback. When I finally reacted, I hastily replied, "Huh, are you crazy? Good, then marry me." I felt Fu Qingye on the opposite side was somewhat inexplicable. I slightly opened my mouth, showing my confusion and surprise. Fu Qingye continued, "I want you to act with me. It won't take long. I know you still have a mortgage to pay off. After this is done, I'll help you pay off your mortgage. Also, I'll give you the position of vice president that you've been longing for, and I'll resign." The amount of information in his words was too much, and it came so suddenly. My head felt muddled. I asked, word by word, "Act married?" "Yes, my grandmother probably has less than half a year left, and I want to fulfill her wish." I pointed to myself with my index finger, still expressing considerable doubt. "Me? Yes, you're very suitable, and you won't pester me in the future." I was still in shock, but I had to admit that Fu Qingye's proposed conditions were too tempting. For the sake of his loved ones and my career, or to be more blunt, for his love and my money, just getting a fake marriage certificate and acting out a play wouldn't harm either of us. After calculating my own benefits, I agreed to Fu Qingye's proposal. At the age of 30, the prince was still as wild as a teenager. Without delay, Fu Qingye and I arrived at the Lambo mansion that evening. The place where his grandmother lived was in a very quiet villa area in the city center. It was said to have been built before urban planning was carried out, and only the wealthy and privileged could live there. I saw Fu Qingye's grandmother, with her white hair, lying in bed. I also saw the prosperity that ordinary people could not enjoy. Suddenly, a sense of tragic grandeur rose in my heart. What use was all the money? When everything came to an end, everyone would leave empty-handed. At that moment, I wanted to tell Fu Qingye that I didn't want to go through with it anymore. Suddenly, I felt that no amount of money was worth it. But when Fu Qingye's grandmother smiled kindly at me, I said the lines I had prepared earlier. "Grandma, I'm Fu Qingye's wife, Wang Zi." His grandmother had lost all her teeth, and she smiled happily at us. I suddenly felt my heart melting. Her grandson, her small wish, had finally found a glimmer of light in the dim twilight. And Fu Qingye wasn't incapable of smiling. When he smiled at his grandmother, he was so gentle and warm, his eyes sparkling brightly. It turned out that there was a kind of tenderness and patience he reserved only for his beloved. Would he treat me the same way? Bah! What am I thinking? When we returned to the room, his face immediately became serious again. He pointed to the large bed in the room and told me that was where I would sleep, while he would sleep on the sofa bed next to it. Fu Qingye's grandmother's house was really big. There were 10 bedrooms on the 3rd floor alone, and Fu Qingye lived in room 309, which required crossing a long corridor to reach, always bathed in sunlight. So, I moved into Fu Qingye's house. During the day, we deliberately avoided being seen together by people from the company, leaving for work at different times. At night, we would meet at a certain place and go home together to have dinner with Fu Qingye's grandmother. Then Fu Qingye would push her in her wheelchair, and we would walk together in the courtyard. It was a peaceful time after the hustle and bustle of the day. Being by his grandmother's side, I felt the flames in my heart no longer raging as fiercely, and I was no longer so competitive. The only thing left was tranquility, a tranquility without confusion or anxiety. At the same time, I felt that a filial man was so charming. When Fu Qingye gently fed his grandmother water, I felt the softest part of my heart touched by Fu Qingye. A voice quietly told me that such a man was worth entrusting a lifetime to. After returning with his grandmother, Fu Qingye and I both needed to continue working. He was at his desk organizing the agenda for the next day's meeting, while I sat on the carpet next to his desk, reviewing the planning proposals in my email. The room was quiet, with occasional sounds of flipping papers and tapping keyboards. After reaching an agreement, Fu Qingye and I rarely argued anymore. We went from being enemies to allies. After all, mutual benefit and win-win cooperation were the prevailing trends of this era. However, bickering was still inevitable in our daily lives. I complained that Fu Qingye snored too loudly, and he complained that I stayed up playing on my phone until the wee hours of the morning. When he woke up at night and saw my face, he said I looked like a ghost. I complained that I had to wear underwear even when living with him at night, which made me uncomfortable. He said he preferred to sleep naked, but he still wore clothes for my sake. You talk so high and mighty, saying it's for me. Aren't you just avoiding responsibility? I'm afraid you're too thirsty, okay? Hey, you're so attentive to your grandmother. Why is your attitude towards me so bad? You're not my grandmother. The next words slipped out of my mouth. But I'm your wife, aren't I? After saying that, both Fu Qingye and I were stunned for a moment. He immediately reacted. Are you really starting to think of yourself as Mrs. Fu? I stepped forward, wanting to kick Fu Qingye, but he had already developed a knack for dodging. Since I moved in, Fu Qingye's grandmother's spirits had improved significantly. Once, when Fu Qingye wasn't around, his grandmother secretly asked me when I was planning to have a baby. It's in the plans. After saying that, my face suddenly turned red. An embarrassing scene from a few days ago inexplicably flashed through my mind. One night, when the room was warm from the heater, I felt overheated in my sleep and unknowingly took off all my pajamas and underwear. I woke up the next day needing to pee urgently. I groggily glanced at Fu Qingye, who was changing clothes not far from me. Without thinking, I threw off the covers and got out of bed. However, unlike before, a rush of cold air enveloped my body. It was only then that I realized I was completely naked and Fu Qingye had seen everything in passing. I panicked and screamed, and Fu Qingye glared at me with his eyes. What are you yelling about so early in the morning? I covered my face with the blanket, muffling a damn under my breath. That day, perhaps because of some chatty servant, his grandmother looked at us with an especially knowing smile, which made me blush and my heart race. So, life continued with its constant ups and downs, and we welcomed the company's annual meeting. I successfully applied for rewards for the members of my team, as it was what a leader should do to treat subordinates well. During that period, the atmosphere in the company was very harmonious, probably the happiest and most relaxed time of the year. Meanwhile, Yi Huan, a highly talented designer from the design department, was pursuing me. He was much more humorous and charming than Fu Qingye, often giving me creatively crafted small gifts. I had already explicitly rejected Yi Huan many times, but he said it was okay. He claimed he was just adhering to the principle of friendly interaction between colleagues, making it difficult for me to say more, lest I appear too presumptuous. For the first time in my life as a prince, I tasted the feeling of being pursued. My 30s were truly my springtime. At the company's annual meeting, encouraged by many colleagues, Fu Qingye and I had our first dance together. He held me by the waist, and I placed my hand on his shoulder. For a moment, neither of us spoke, but our dance steps were perfectly synchronized. After living together for these 3 months, I had become accustomed to his unique scent, just as he had become familiar with the fragrance of the shampoo I liked. The atmosphere around us suddenly became ambiguous, and I found myself wishing that the music would never stop. Fu Qingye and I danced together until eternity. Then, a small mishap occurred in the venue. The lights suddenly went out, and I found myself tightly embraced by Fu Qingye. In the darkness, I could faintly see his eyes, and then his breath drew closer. He planted a gentle kiss on my lips before quickly pulling away. Before I could react, the lights came back on. It had only been 3 seconds, but the scene had completely changed. I was still in Fu Qingye's arms. The situation was chaotic and nobody noticed us. I pulled Fu Qingye to a secluded corner outside, and he looked at me with confusion. "What's going on?" he asked. "I want to kiss you," I said, and then I pressed my lips against Fu Qingye's. He seemed taken aback by my sudden boldness. It took a considerable effort for me to part his lips with mine. The next moment, he began to respond, aggressively and passionately, filled with desire. I knew that the hormones in our bodies had been ignited by the events of the dance. After my neck began to ache, I finally pushed Fu Qingye away. Caught off guard, he took a step back. After regaining his balance, he looked at me with astonishment. I casually wiped the corner of my mouth with the back of my hand, as if I had just finished drinking alcohol, pretending to be crazy. I acted as if nothing had happened. I didn't want to reveal my true feelings. I was afraid of rejection. Even a queen had her vulnerabilities and stubbornness. Unfortunately, Fu Qingye didn't say anything either. We parted ways and drove home separately, lying in our respective beds. I wondered if what had happened a few hours ago was just a dream. That's why, despite the potential for love to blossom, nothing ultimately happened. Lost in my thoughts, my phone screen lit up. I received an anonymous email, which contained a recording of Yi Huan's voice. The recording was a bit noisy, and it seemed like there were several people present. Then Yi Huan's voice appeared. "Wanna bet? I bet I can get Prince within a month. Those leftover old spinsters who nobody's chasing after are the most desperate. Probably won't even take a month, a week will do. Here's the deal. If you get her within a month, we'll each give you $1,000. If you don't, you'll be in charge of office hygiene for the rest of the year." The recording was intermittent, but the gist was clear. I placed my phone next to my pillow, trying to hold back tears as I lay in bed, making sure not to make a sound, afraid that Fu Qingye might notice something was wrong. I couldn't understand it. What was wrong with being a female executive? I had climbed to my current position based on my own abilities. What was wrong with being a leftover woman? Wasn't it because I had encountered scumbags? Every woman yearned for love. Why should I endure their ridicule, and why should I be treated as a pawn in their game? If this had happened a few years ago, I would have confronted them immediately. But I was 30 now. I couldn't act impulsively. I couldn't escalate the situation. I had to pretend that nothing had happened. But I wasn't someone to be trifled with. I would find some dirt on Yi Huan. Our company couldn't have someone with such poor morals. No matter how good his designs were, they would be meaningless if he didn't deserve to be here. Before that, I had to play a game with Yi Huan. There were probably less than 3 days left before the deadline for Yi Huan to pursue me. I could sense his impatience, so I deliberately dropped hints in his department that I was interested in someone, saying how happy I was when I was with him, even at work. I didn't mention any names, although my words implied Fu Qingye. They would definitely think it was Yi Huan. As expected, my words reached Yi Huan's ears, and he quickly took action, organizing a romantic gesture for me at the company. After carefully grooming myself, I prepared to meet him. I chuckled to myself like an evil old witch from a cartoon. A good show was about to begin. But to my surprise, before I could make an appearance, Fu Qingye had already gone there, although I had kept it a secret from him. According to the assistant's description, when Fu Qingye arrived, he simply said, "Prince is my woman." And everyone present was too intimidated to say a word. Wang Jia, President Fu is so cool. Yi Huan is still President Fu's subordinate. The assistant was chattering behind me, eyes sparkling, as I hurried to the scene. Fu Qingye had ruined my plans. I had prepared all the evidence to retaliate against Yi Huan. When I arrived at the scene, they were already packing up, and the once beautiful flowers now looked worn out. Fu Qingye stood at the door with his hands in his pockets. When he saw me, he asked, "What are you doing here?" At that moment, everyone's gaze in the room turned to me. Feeling a bit overwhelmed, a brave woman spoke up, "President Fu, do you know that Director Wang personally said she likes Yi Huan?" "Oh." Fu Qingye turned to look at me, his expression displeased, like a true husband catching his wife in the act of cheating. My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly regained my composure. I was referring to enjoying working with him. I didn't mention any names, and so far, the only person I've worked closely with is not Yi Huan. I paused before continuing. In the company, I hope everyone can focus on their work instead of concerning themselves with my personal life. Whether you call me a female executive or an old leftover woman, all I know is that the only thing I can do in my life is to become good enough so that I can match with the person I love. I hadn't achieved much in these years, but I had certainly developed a commanding presence. But it was all Fu Qingye's fault for not following my plan to bring Yi Huan down. The dark forces in my heart were stirring. With that in mind, I added, "President Fu, I have some doubts about your management skills. I hope you can manage your subordinates well, or at least prevent rumors from reaching my ears." After that, I turned and walked away as if scolding a real husband as his wife. After a few steps, Fu Qingye caught up with me and pulled me into his office. The first thing he said after closing the door was, "I'm not happy. At least during our cooperation, I don't want you to cuckold me. You ruined my plans. Why shouldn't I be unhappy? Plans? Setting traps for them to fall into, is that fun?" I quickly caught on to the words Fu Qingye used and felt like he knew everything about the situation from start to finish. But who was he to question me like that? If not, should I continue to be their betting chip? Why are you guys the diamond bachelors, and why are women unwanted leftover singles? Should I just wait for someone to help me, wait for them to bully me and laugh at me? As I spoke, tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. I remembered how I had been betrayed by my ex-boyfriend and had worked my way up alone to where I was now. I hadn't developed the habit of seeking someone to rely on whenever something happened. Tears were only for the weak, but what did it mean if I cried now? I sniffled and didn't want to argue with Fu Qingye anymore, so I said in a slightly hoarse voice, "If there's nothing else, I'm going to work." But Fu Qingye suddenly hugged me, and he only said 3 words, "You have me." Then came a warm kiss, and we embraced in the room. If the company's annual meeting a month ago was the catalyst, then what happened with Yi Huan was the symbol of us being together. Fu Qingye said he felt sorry for me, so he reluctantly decided to protect me in the future. I frowned and glared at him. "Give you one more chance. Say it again." "I misspoke, Your Majesty. It's you who will protect me in the future." Fu Qingye began to smile tenderly at me, not like before when he always seemed to be pulling down the blinds on his face. Although he didn't admit it verbally, I think he loved me. With Fu Qingye proclaiming it so loudly, our affair became known throughout the company. Yi Huan voluntarily resigned, and I burned all the documents I had prepared to dismiss Yi Huan. The assistant whispered to me, "Sister Wang, can you believe there are still idiots who dare to provoke you too? With you and President Fu joining forces, who dares to mess with you?" That's one way to put it, but it sounds awkward. That night, in Fu Qingye's study again, I brought up the matter. I asked him if we were too high profile and if the company would fire us. I looked worried, but Fu Qingye was calm and said, "Getting fired would be perfect." Huh. Aren't there many companies trying to poach you? Are you afraid you won't find a job? Who gave you such confidence? Changing companies is such a hassle. Confidence comes from oneself. After all, you are the woman I fancy. This man, really. The woman you fancy says she's under a lot of pressure. She's already being quite accommodating, but there are still so many people who don't like her. It's not that you're not doing well, it's that you can never please everyone. Fu Qingye paused for a moment before continuing. So, instead of wasting time trying to please everyone, why don't you please me for a change? Let's consummate our relationship tonight. I pretended not to hear and continued to flip through my files. Unexpectedly, Fu Qingye came directly to me and said, "Is this still a study?" Huh. Before I could react, he kissed me. The kiss wasn't right, and my waist felt uncomfortable, so I gently pushed him away and whispered, "To the bed." Fu Qingye smiled happily and picked me up, heading for the bedroom. The soft slippers on his feet made a faint sound against the floor. I buried my face in his chest, feeling blissfully slow-witted. Upon learning that Fu Qingye and I were together, Shevin sent us a gift from abroad, a beautifully crafted gift box containing 2 masks. As soon as I saw them, I recognized them as the masks I had used 5 years ago at Shevin's party overseas. That party was organized by Shevin to help me get over my breakup and find love again. That day, I wore a black long dress and wore one of the black masks. The other mask, white in color, was worn by the man I kissed during a game who was wearing a white suit. It was also on that night that I received a message from my ex-boyfriend. Although we had broken up months ago, he unexpectedly messaged me asking if I could return the money he spent on buying me a necklace. Angry and disheartened, I lost interest in staying at the party and forgot about the man in the white suit. After returning home, Shevin never brought it up again, and I gradually forgot about the incident. But now, as Shevin presented the masks to me, I suddenly realized there was a story behind them. Sure enough, when Fu Qingye picked up the white mask and examined it closely, he suddenly turned to me with a smile and said, "Long time no see, Your Majesty." I was so surprised that I couldn't speak. "We met 5 years ago?" Fu Qingye replied seriously, "We didn't meet, we just kissed." "Then you already knew it was me?" "Not right away. It wasn't until after the dance at the annual meeting that I suddenly remembered what happened 5 years ago. So I asked Shevin to confirm, and it turned out to be true." Fu Qingye also told me that he had been with someone else later because he mistakenly thought the woman he kissed at the party was her. She told him she liked to wear black long dresses. Instead of continuing to inquire, Fu Qingye let this seemingly beautiful coincidence run through their love story from beginning to end. If you had searched earlier, would we have been together sooner? Unfortunately, there are no ifs. After saying this somewhat witty remark, he shrugged. It's okay. There are still many years ahead. I secretly told myself that perhaps fate wanted us to miss each other for 5 years, just to make us both a little better before we met again. Countless neon lights hung in the night, where light and darkness were compatible, ultimately forming a gentle night. Fu Qingye made me understand that even the strongest queen had her flaws and wasn't always smart. Over the years, with a knight to protect her, she no longer needed to be strong. A year later, Fu Qingye neither paid off my mortgage nor gave me the position of deputy general manager. Instead, he gave me a permanent pass to room 309. Considering he was the father of my child, I temporarily forgave him. As I looked up, I saw our child sleeping soundly in his grandmother's arms. I took the child from her as I was afraid she might get tired, and she told me that 30 years ago, she used to hold Fu Qingye in the same way, a smile hiding at the corners of her eyes. My heart softened, and I was suddenly moved. Our life now was so happy. Grandma, you must live a long and healthy life.